I joined UKIP, well, my card here says in 1992, because that was when it was the Anti-Federalist League. So for over a quarter of a century, I've been involved in UKIP and its forerunner. I have worked tirelessly for UKIP. I've spoken at 1,500 public meetings up and down the country. During those years, I've travelled hundreds of thousands of miles, and the aim was very simple. It was to take votes away from the establishment parties to force a vote in this country that would get us back our independence. And you could argue that in 2016 we had been pretty successful. One of the keys to that was talking about things that everybody else wanted to brush under the carpet, issues like immigration, which we were told if you discuss that, it's somehow disreputable. I made sure that UKIP talked about tough issues, but we absolutely excluded anybody who'd ever been a member of the British National Party, the English Defence League. We wanted to make sure that when the abuse was thrown at us, it couldn't possibly be proved to be true. Now, I'm afraid that over the course of the last few months, under this leader, Mr. Gerard Batten, a lot has changed, and he seems to be pretty obsessed with the issue of Islam, not just Islamic extremism, but Islam, and UKIP wasn't founded to be a party based on fighting a religious crusade. And also obsessed with this figure called Tommy Robinson, whose real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon, who is seen by some to be a great hero standing up and fighting for working class people, but who has a pretty suspect record and who brings with him a group of people, I'm afraid, amongst which we see scuffles, violence. Many have criminal records, some pretty serious. And all of it's been dragging UKIP away from being an electoral party into a party of street activism. I have warned, and I wrote 10 days ago, that this direction was catastrophic, particularly at a time when the great Brexit betrayal is upon us. Both the Labour and Conservative parties have broken promises that were made not just in the referendum, but in the general election as well. Things couldn't be better for UKIP, but unfortunately, we've gone in this direction of street activism and turning a blind eye to extremist politics. Many of the best people that I've worked with over those many long years have already left the party in the space of the last few weeks. There was one last hope that the party's national executive at the weekend would do something about this, would, pass a motion of no confidence in Gerard Batten ahead of what's due this Sunday. And this Sunday, there's going to be a march in London with Gerard Batten and Tommy Robinson as the speakers. That 2 days before the most important parliamentary vote of modern times. And the image that will give of what Brexit stands for is something that our enemies will use against us for perhaps many years to come. Damaging UKIP is one thing. Damaging the Brexit cause is even worse. And I, with a very heavy heart, given how much I've cared for this party, the people within it, have reached, I think, a very sad decision, certainly very sad for me, that I simply can't go on with it. I don't recognise the party as being the one that I helped to found and fought for all of those years. I believe the brand been now so damaged, so tarnished, that it's not able to pick up and won't be able to pick up the political opportunity that's there, staring it in the face. And so with very great reluctance, I have, as of now, resigned my membership of UKIP, cancelled by standing order at the bank. I'm no longer a member of UKIP, which, hey, it's made up the biggest part of my adult life. It's a very sad thing to do, but there it is. It's done.
So that was Nigel Farage's official reason for leaving UKIP. But was it the real reason? Now, there's much there that is actually quite questionable, especially with the consistency or lack thereof that Farage has shown on these same subjects in the past. And it seems that there might be more lurking beneath the surface. Full disclosure, I'm actually a huge fan of Nigel Farage, and so I'm rather saddened to see this happen and see him go in this direction. But I do kind of take objection to some of the things he said there as well. For example, UKIP being an electoral force. Well, when? Farage himself has stood for South Thanet 7 times and failed 7 times. So, not particularly electorally productive in Britain, at least. And I think UKIP have only ever had like 1 MP. Lots of MEPs, because it seems the British public are quite happy to send Eurosceptics to the European Parliament, where they can do absolutely nothing. but they're not so happy to send them to the British Parliament where they might actually be able to table legislation. But again, that's just more of the same problem with the European Union. When he says that himself and UKIP have never shied away from discussing the difficult issues, well, isn't that exactly what you're doing here, Nigel? You seem to be running from a particularly difficult issue, which is Islam. Now, I'm not pro-Islam, but I'm not really anti-Islam any more than I would be any anti-other religion as an atheist, and I'm more for a liberal order than I am from an Islamic order, but that's not a judgment on any one Muslim. But the point is, this is a conversation that we need to have in this country, because there are large segments of the population now who are Muslim, and there are segments within those that are quite extreme in their devotion to the religion. And it's a difficult conversation that we need to have, because Britain generally isn't the land of religious extremism. In fact, we're actually famous for our religious tolerance, and I don't think that the religious extremists who follow Islam are particularly tolerant. And this is a difficult conversation that we need to have. And the government is currently in the process of trying to criminalise that. So, I mean, it kind of seems like you are shying away from a tough conversation here. And on your point of UKIP never having had any truck with far-right people or anything like that, well, I agree that's not the goal of UKIP, and they have specific rules in place to prevent that. That doesn't mean that it hasn't happened. I mean, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party also have councillors who are ex-BNP, and as Gerard Batten pointed out,
local councillors for the Conservative Party and the Labour Party who are former BNP members or National Front. And Nigel, of course, employed somebody who had been a former member of the National Front.
Wow, I didn't know that.
As a personal kind of assistant, yeah.
I do have to hand it to Gerard Batten there. I mean, it does seem that there is a degree of hypocrisy there. If you personally hired someone who was ex-National Front, and like we've seen, the other political parties don't even try to prevent people from the BNP joining or the National Front joining. So it seems to be a strange hill to die on. This is why Gerard Batten took Tommy on as an advisor, and again, it seems to have been entirely Gerard's perspective, because he has described Tommy as a hero in the past, and he seems to look up to what he's doing, and Gerard seems to have a bit of a problem with Islam as a philosophy and ideology in and of itself.
Our National Executive Committee said, not at the moment, you can't do this until after the 29th of March when we've left the EU, because they want to kick it in, they don't want this to be an issue. Okay, fair enough, I accepted their decision on that, it's a democratic decision, but then I decided I still needed his input on these two subjects, and also I wanted to encourage all those people who actually think that he has something to say, that we're not abandoning him, that we still want to associate with him in some way, and that's what's got me into trouble with some elements of the party.
Nigel's comments about UKIP being, quote, obsessed with Islam don't appear to be entirely consistent either, because it's not like in the past Nigel Farage hasn't commented on Islam. The Socialists are, of course, taking full advantage of this UKIP infighting and have provided us with a convenient list of times when Nigel Farage himself obsessed over Islam. The first one was when he raged against immigration from Muslim countries, saying only 20% of people want immigration from Muslim countries to continue. I simply cannot believe that MEPs are blind to the fact that even Mrs. Merkel wants a U-turn and wants to send people back. Well, I mean, I don't disagree with him. In fact, that was something of his that I completely agreed with. Why would we want mass immigration from Muslim countries? There seems to be a fundamental clash of values when it comes to Islamic countries, Islamic values, and liberal British values. It's not a commentary on any of these people, but it does seem to be a fact of life. The second point, of course, is when he defended Donald Trump over his, quote, anti-Muslim policies, which I don't agree. I mean, if Trump had wanted to ban Muslims, surely he could have done it rather than just banning people from 6 countries that have a problem with Islamic extremism. Number 3 was when he accused British Muslims of having split loyalties, which, again, is something that we have to talk about, really, don't we, Mr. Farage? And here we are with you not shying away from the difficult conversation. Previously, in the wake of the Paris attacks, saying their conflicted loyalties between the UK and their religion demanded a battle for hearts and minds within the Muslim population and warned of tremendous conflict. Kind of sounds like you're going on a bit of an ideological crusade against Islam to win over the hearts and minds of the Muslims towards the pro-Western side. when he told Fox News without evidence that London is full of Muslim gangs, and apparently when he endorsed the far-right Leave.eu campaign, he endorsed a tweet of Londinistan next to a picture of Sadiq Khan. So it's not like, Nigel, you don't have concerns about Islam. We know you do. And so the question seems to be centered not so much on the content of it, more the timing of it and the people involved. Specifically Tommy Robinson, and during the catastrophe of the Tories handling Brexit at these crucial moments, which I think is a really fair criticism, and what I brought up to Batten in my interview with him. The interview I'll link in the description just in case you haven't seen it. And it's interesting how people are saying things like, plot twist, Heaver is a paid flunky of Aaron Banks. Farage's resignation has nothing to do with Yaxley Lennon, Tommy Robinson. With Farage, it's only ever about Farage. This is clearing the way for what happens next with the quote of, we need a Brexiteer Prime Minister and Nigel Farage in the Conservative Party. Interesting. Very interesting. Especially given this recent rant by Hull MEP Mike Hookham, a man I've met, and he was very nice. Very nice chap when I met him in the European Parliament. And I'll say in advance that Gerard Batten has said very similar things to me personally, and Batten has known Farage for 26 years. As he says in the interview with him, they weren't friends, they were just colleagues. They were forced to work alongside one another to achieve the shared goal of the Brexit referendum. But Mike Hookham's statements have been corroborated to me by various other people at various other times from long-standing members of UKIP, and so I've got no reason to think that this isn't at least somewhat reflective of reality, and I think would go some way to explaining the inconsistencies in Mr. Farage's position here. So Mike Hookham, and one of the things I really liked about Mike is he did not mince his words. Right? He branded Farage, who quit in protest at the direction of the party, as a fading star who will be no practical loss to UKIP. And given how UKIP's membership is skyrocketing at the moment, it's hard to disagree with him. He called the former leader a hypocrite for ripping up his membership card, but failing to step down from his £78,000 a year MEP job. That's important because in 2014, when he was still the leader of the party, Nigel demanded that all incoming UKIP MEPs sign a letter stating that they would hand their seat back to the party if they were to leave, and we all signed. Well, it seems that Nigel Farage, by his own rules, should now resign his seat as a UKIP MEP because, as far as UKIP is concerned, the seat belongs to the party before it belongs to the MEP in question. But the point is, this is yet another inconsistency, and I think that fans of Nigel Farage and members of UKIP and people who just generally support what UKIP are trying to achieve can see these as well. I'm not necessarily saying anything that other people don't know, I'm just categorising all in this video. Mike Hookham, of course, called him an utter hypocrite to keep his own seat on leaving the party, and it's hard to argue with that, especially if Nigel Farage was the one saying you've all got to sign a letter saying if you leave the party you've got to give up your seat. And say that UKIP are doing badly is just simply not true. As they say here, currently the party is polling as high as 8% compared to the lows of 1% just earlier this year. Under Batten's leadership, UKIP have bounced back phenomenally. Now, the political ground has been very fertile for UKIP to do this, and they have. As a member of UKIP, I would recommend that other UKIP members start going door to door and just canvassing and saying, look, the Tories can't be trusted with Brexit, Labour certainly can't be trusted with Brexit, there is only one party, please vote UKIP. But in Hookham's opinion, and honestly the opinion of many other people that I've spoken to in UKIP, MEPs that I've spoken to in UKIP, Hookham believes that, in his experience, Farage cannot handle not being the centre of attention. And Tommy is such a divisive figure, far more than Nigel ever was, that the attention, I think, is naturally drawn to him. He believed that Farage's behaviour is the culmination of a 25-year love-hate relationship he has shared with Gerard Batten, after Gerard Batten has frankly saved the party. Hookham says, the fact that Gerard Batten has rescued UKIP from financial disaster, in part caused by Farage's leadership, continue to build the party's poll ratings, increase membership, must, in my opinion, cut deeply into Nigel's vast sense of self-importance. In reality, Farage has made it plain since leaving leadership role that he has nothing but contempt for the membership and those who voted for UKIP. The loss of Nigel as a supporter will have an impact in sentimental terms, but in practical terms, he is no significant loss. If anything, UKIP is now free of the shackles of the past and can build for the future. And that's genuinely how I feel about it. As Nigel said, UKIP wasn't founded to be a multi-issue party. It was founded to be a Brexit pressure group. Well, that's been and gone. We've had the referendum. We know where that stands. So if UKIP wants to have any kind of future, now it has to become, in my opinion, a multi-issue party. I think they should severely take on political correctness, radical Islam and Islamism of certain northern towns and areas, and the social conflict that Islam is causing in this country, radical leftism, socialism, the Labour Party, and any other populist concerns that aren't being addressed by the mainstream parties. Because like I've said before, and I say this directly to UKIP's credit, UKIP feels like a homegrown party. It feels like a real people's party, rather than just a party of polished politicians. And I think they can actually speak to real issues that are actually affecting people in their real lives. But if we continue to be hyper-focused on Brexit, and at the moment there's really very little anyone can actually do. The Conservatives are rallying around Theresa May for some reason. It looks like we're going to get screwed by Theresa May and we're not going to be able to do anything until the next general election. So we can sit there and put all the pressure we want on Theresa May and the Conservatives, but we can't actually force them to change. So why shouldn't we use this time where we're kind of idling, waiting for the disaster to actually strike us, to start laying the groundwork of the future of a party that can actually do things for the people of this country, rather than following the self-interest of the rich and powerful? But like I said at the beginning, I'm still a fan of Nigel Farage. When I met him in the European Parliament in Strasbourg, I fanboyed. I told him thank you for standing up in front of the European Parliament and saying that they're not laughing now after the Brexit referendum was successful on our end. I'm still a fan of the way he attacks them on the idea of not seeing through Brexit to the Brexit that people actually voted for, which was leaving the European Union. And personally, I can overlook the fact that he's not being, in my opinion, morally or intellectually consistent in this regard. It seems to be that this is about his ego rather than about what's actually really happening or good for the party. And that's his prerogative. Everyone does this. It's not the worst thing that he could do. And I really don't want people to just turn on Nigel Farage. Because like I said, I think he's one of the best voices for Brexit and has been from the start. So I'm not just going to sit there and cast him under the bus. But I am going to take what he's saying with a pinch of salt and take it under advisement. I think this is sad, but everyone's star's got to fade sometime. But again, he'll still be a very important figure when it comes to talking about Brexit, and very knowledgeable on the subject and very entertaining to listen to. So I look forward to him continuing to fight the good fight, and we in UKIP will continue to fight the good fight too.